I'm Eric Wolf, and my experience in business peer groups has changed my life, especially my membership in Vistage, one of the world's largest CEO advisory groups. I'm an entrepreneur, a business owner, and a Vistage speaker on the power of marketing. This podcast is dedicated to the people who make those experiences possible, the peer group chairs. Every episode, I interview a Vistage chair who has dedicated their time to helping entrepreneurs like me succeed. Welcome to Chairwaves. My guest today is Mr. Chris Donnelly from the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, PA. There's a lot that I want to talk to you about, but I think that I would be remiss if I didn't start with the fact that you dug your heels in as a business person, as a second generation in a family business.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that that's a concept that you deal with in the Vistage community as well. I would love to hear about your experience, because being an entrepreneur is difficult and has its challenges.
Yeah.
Being in a family business, and especially being the second or third generation, has a lot of challenges. And I'd really love to hear about your experience and why you got into the family business and what all you learned.
Yeah, that's a great way to kick off, and thank you for asking that. I actually worked at this business twice in my life. I got out of the Navy in 2003, and I started answering phones and doing dispatch. This is a plumbing business. It's like home services, and so We're dealing with retail customers. My first day on the job was like February 17th of 2003, and there had been this huge snowstorm, and they handed me a stack of papers that had all these like client calls on them from over the weekend, and we couldn't get out because it was snowing. And they're like, "Here, kid, call all these people and enter them into the system so that we can run these calls." And there was like 400 calls on this
wow.
sheet. And so I'm like, my first day, I'm typing away in this DOS-based system, entering phone calls into a CRM. And I'd been a police officer in the military, so like this was a huge transition for me. And
imagine so.
And it was quite the experience. And
plus, when people piss you off, you can't shoot them.
We don't have that luxury in the military either. I learned all the basics of dispatching and call taking, and they had me doing odd jobs. I set up an inventory system for them. The business was very small at the time. There was probably 6 or 7 plumbers, and my father and his supervisor. And then I was 20 something, and like all 20 somethings, you think that the world's right there for you. And I didn't think that it was moving fast enough that I would get engaged and learn how to run this business. And so I decided that I was going to leave. And so I ended up leaving Donnelly's, and I started a career at Citigroup, which ultimately led me into investment banking and doing a whole bunch of cool things.
Which also a far departure from both plumbing and being military police.
Yeah. I've been a long and meandering story, and so I find myself in banking. Our office was in Tribeca, and we're on the 35th floor, and I'm looking uptown Manhattan. Like I could see right up 6th Avenue to the sign, and it's this amazing view. And I'm just some kid from Penn State who happened to be at the right place at the right time, I guess. And I was fortunate enough to work hard and earn my way into the associate program there, and did a few years in that program before my mother contracted pancreatic cancer in 2013, and she passed really rapidly. And my father had this business still, and he was like, I'm a wreck. I don't know what's going on here. Maybe you want to come back here and buy this business from me so that I can heal and recover from this like very traumatizing event.
And I'm sorry, that is absolutely traumatizing. That's with cancer, I know that there aren't a lot of, nice ways to go, but I know that's an especially ugly one. So that must have been extremely, extremely hard on your family.
Yeah, it was tough. And my father is going through his grief. And so I'm sort of holding everything together, making sure that we're doing the appropriate things for arrangements. And he's just in his grief. My girlfriend, we were married at this time, but my wife at the time, she was helping him, and he had other friends and stuff that were that were helping him get through with this. And then Citigroup was really great because they didn't. I think I really learned to respect people in their times of need, because the bank never really asked much of me, and I think I learned to really be human with people in human moments because of how they treated me then. And they never asked me to come up, and outside of, they basically said whatever you need, like take the time that you need, which I thought was really unusual. And I was fortunate. And so in October of 2013, I left Citigroup. I came home, and I started again the second time in November of 2013.
I want to ask, this is I'm sure, uh, something that you've dealt with in your group as well, but, you know, something traumatic happens and somebody has to come and step up and kind of be the glue that's holding everything together. Your dad's having, understandably, a terribly hard time. How, being in that situation where you are now, you're working at a bank, important job. You're making arrangements. You're looking at taking over this family business. It's a lot to juggle at one time. How did you manage your own grief while you were also the person trying to hold things together?
Yeah, you're the first person to ask me that question, and the answer truly is that I didn't. And I bottled it all up. And you got to understand, I went to military high school when I was 12, and so I was on my own basically from 12 years old on. And then I joined the military when I was 18, and so I was just off in the world doing all of these things. And I think over the period of that time, I learned to hold on to these things. And so when this big event actually happened, it wasn't apparent to me to allow myself to do that. And so I did, what I was supposed to do. I held everything together and made sure that it moved forward. We had a really nice service. My father got to all the places he needed to go to. We got into grief counseling. I came back and started taking over the business. And Eric, it wasn't until probably 10 years later that I finally, it wasn't until after I exited the business that I
Oh,
was
wow.
free and allowed to, that I gave myself permission to actually grieve that moment and feel that.
What would it, if you were putting your hat on as now a Vistage chair of a CE group,
Mm-hmm.
if you had a member that was going through a situation similar to what you had, and there are folks among us who do, what advice would you give yourself in that situation, from this distant place where you
Sure.
can see the forest and the trees?
I mean, I guess to look at this from two different ways, I can look at it from me now to back to me then. And then I can also look at it as, if I had a member that was going through this. And to answer the first one, to give myself advice, I guess there's nothing really you can say or do in that situation, except I think when you're looking back and trying to move forward from things, you can remember where you were in those places and go back and be kind to yourself in those moments. And I think that helps you. I think that helps you move forward and process the things that were unprocessed in the past. And that's just a personal thing. I think part of that is true for if you have a member that's going through that. Fortunately, I don't. But if I did, I would imagine that there'd be a lot of just being there for them
Yeah,
and sitting with them and giving them space to to feel whatever emotions that they want to feel. And it's likely that a lot of people would respond how I did and try to bottle it up and try to compartmentalize and try to move forward. And I have firsthand experience that it the bill comes due when you try to hold these things in. And so I guess from the chair perspective, it's more about asking the right questions to allow people to speak out the things that they're experiencing internally,
Yeah.
and not trying to fix anything for them. I think a lot of people would try and soothe people in those situations, and I certainly don't do that. I'd like to give people space to experience whatever it is that they're going to experience, and in that situation, I'm really fortunate to be there with them and to share that moment, and so that's really special and that's really powerful.
Um, I'd love to talk real quick about you ran the business for 10 years,
Yeah, about
obviously
about 10 years. Yeah.
ran it with some success, and you earned an exit. What was the exit process like? And obviously it was, as you just revealed, it was very emotional in ways that you
Hmm.
probably weren't expecting.
Yeah.
Um, but what led you to hey, it's time for us to go?
I That's a really well phrased question. Um, Led Zeppelin has a song where part of the verse is like, and now autumn's fallen and it's time for me to go. And I remember during the process, like this song is in my head, repeatedly, like going through this, and I sort of just knew. We had arrived at a space where I'd built a leadership team and we had built the systems, and we were doing EOS and we were doing all these things, and we had built the culture, and it felt like it had become a place where I'd put so much time and energy and money and resources into getting it to where it was
Yeah,
that I was just tired. And and that's the easy answer, is that like you just get tired when you're doing these things. And so we had actually some real macro competitive factors that were happening. Home services is ripe with consolidation over the last 5 or 6 years. And so particularly this market is very hot, and it has been since 2017. And so many of the big good businesses in this market had already been consolidated, which caused a lot of unit cost pressure.
hmm
And so we were facing significant competition, not only in how we were pricing, so we are seeing some margin compression, but how are we going to continue to acquire equipment at a good unit cost that was going to allow us to continue to be successful or to continue to grow at the rate we wanted to. We also needed to make an investment in marketing. And marketing here is expensive, and
hmm
after building a leadership team and doing all these things, I certainly didn't have the personal capital for the lift that at that time. And then the third piece is that I would always wanted a training center. In 2014, I identified that a key pivot point for the industry was going to be individual companies' ability to produce their own technicians. And in 2014, I was just starting to step into general management and taking over the daily flow of the business. It was still my father's business at the time. I didn't buy it until 2016. And it was one of those things. This is my big regret, is that I didn't set up the training center in 2014 and start training people when we had the opportunity and the space to do it. Because had we have done that, we would have likely had a very serious competitive advantage, that was durable and lasting. So because of those three things, we needed more space, we needed the training program, we needed the marketing dollars, and we needed to find some way to overcome this unit cost pressure. Certainly, I didn't have to do this, but it felt like at the time that it was like the nexus of like all these different things, where me as the CEO, I believe that we needed to find a big brother, somebody that
yeah.
could help do these things. And one of the stipulations in the deal process was is that I was done, and I did that because I thought it would be. I talked to a lot of guys from a lot of. Let me back up. So home services and technicians and people that work in distributed services, the people that whose job it is to ride around in the truck all day, they they need to know and believe that the owners of the business have their best interest at heart at all times. And they smell out any sort of disingenuous action like faster than anybody I've ever seen. And so you have to
Yeah.
really put
I
them
assume that
first.
plumbers develop a nose for certain things.
Right. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And and all jokes aside, they're these people are masters of people, because they're going to they're going to 685 homes a year, knocking on the door, having to
Mm-hmm.
read a room, like they're highly attuned to social situations and reading people and getting a good read. So you have to really be, authentic and genuine and have their best interests at heart. And so I say all that to say that if I would have stayed, I knew that it wouldn't that I would be viewed as taking advantage of, this situation. And so it was very apparent that I needed to exit and exit cleanly from this situation. And after we signed and I told the team, there was a lot of thank yous, like thank you for trusting us to carry on the name and legacy. And it was really special. It was a when we finally closed and hearing those things from all these people that I had worked with for so long, like it was really good.
Now, and you mentioned, getting a big brother. I'm assuming that in this case, the big brother was a PE firm. Um,
Not necessarily. I had
or was it a
known
bigger competitor?
No, I had known, in a way, yeah. I had known this guy for maybe 10 years. He had worked at a number of other businesses and had a few exits. And I was in the process of marketing this business. So I'm going to roadshows. I'm going to all these different places and
Sure.
talking to all these people. And I think I had eight or 12 serious offers. And I was in the final stages. And I'd set a date. I said to myself, either going to sign something or I'm not by this date. And we were getting really close to that. And my GM and I, who is now the CEO of the business, we went to visit a competitor who was interested, and we left that business. And I remember looking at him like, hey, do you think you could work for these guys? And like as soon as I said it, I knew that the answer, like if you've saved something like that, the answer is no, right?
Right.
And I was about ready to call it off, and then my friend had called me, and he had been consolidating companies for a number of years, and I knew and liked him, and I trusted him, and so he said, "Give me." I told him he had a few days to put something together. He was like, "I'll make it happen," and sure enough, he did. They delivered, and 3 months later we closed.
Um, and I asked the PE question because typically that deal that you got is where you actually could leave as part of the transaction is pretty rare in that world. A lot of the times they want the current management to stay for 12 months, 18 months,
Yep.
24
Mm-hmm.
months.
Yeah.
Um, uh, but I'm guessing in this situation that was something that you could manage where you could say, "Hey, I don't want to do this and not endanger the deal."
Yeah. It is rare, and this is one of the things that I constantly talk about with my members and with any business owner that'll listen is, you if you have to be there and you find that you're rushing in to save people or make decisions or doing these things, you're too involved in the day-to-day operation of the business, even if you think that you're not. And what allowed me the flexibility to get a deal like that was that I had built a leadership team that really ran the day to day. And what wasn't apparent to me at the time was I could have taken 9 months off. Like
Hmm.
I spoke to the guy that replaced me the other day, and I was like, I really needed to take 6, 9, 10 months off, and he's like, oh yeah, you could have done that. And it just didn't occur to me at the time because you're so deep in it. And I was only working 6 hours in the business a week at that time. Like my full time job was marketing the business.
Right.
And so we had come up with a strategy and we had come up with all this stuff, and he was executing on that plan. And so I was free to then live into this space of, all right, how do I raise capital? How do we increase valuation? Like what's the real thing that the CEO needs to be doing? And so I find knowing the value and increasing the value of the firm is fundamental. And so when you go out and you're getting LOIs that are like telling you what the market values your business at, you sort of go down this path and you're like, all right, we're doing the right things here because we're getting good offers back. And I knew that because we had built the leadership team and because we had solid financials and because we had our risks all buttoned up and because we knew our numbers and because we were good operators and because we had a succession plan in place, like all of these
Yeah.
factors helped us out. And we had operational things that worked in our favor too. We had good recurring revenue through service contracts, and we had over 4,000 Google reviews. Like, we had a lot of really good structural competitive advantages that allowed us to make a deal like that, I think.
I'd like to go back to something that you brought up close to the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about that you were in the Navy as military police, and it's not uncommon that Vistage chairs. I have known many Vistage chairs that have done some type of military service. When you look back at what you got from that experience, and you look at your day to day now in working with members and leading your meetings, and what are the things that you learned then that you catch bubbling up now as you're in your day to day?
The most frequent thing that comes up is people wanting to build a genuine sense of camaraderie in their businesses. This notion of the people come to work every day for the people that they work with, as opposed to for someone and their benefit. Service is a lot more than I think people realize. And I certainly built my business around that concept, because this concept of camaraderie, where you're really reliant on the people around you to lift you up and to support you and to help you get your job done, that it's more than teamwork, is fundamental to the success of any organization. And in fact, now when I look at venture capital and I look at investing in that space, it's my whole thesis is built around which company has the best team that works well together, and who plays the best together in the sandbox. And those are the teams that I like to those are the businesses that I like to look at. And that's one of the first things I look at when I look at my members too, is how well does the owner interact with the leadership team, and how tight knit are those people. And so the interpersonal relationships is something that really pops up. And this goes even deeper into how people deal with each other one to one. There's this concept in boxing called being in the hole. Have you ever heard of this?
Mm-mm.
So when two fighters go head to head, and you're in close, almost in a clinch, you're considered in the hole, and you're very close to someone. And what your natural inclination is what gets scary, is to get out of that space. But what I find is that when you're communicating with people and you're in a business like this, you're trying to do important, difficult things, the longer that you can stay connected and stay aligned and be in conversation and communication with people, to stay in the hole with them, to really understand where they're coming from, what their point of view is, what their fears are, the more trust you're going to generate in that relationship. And then two, the greater the sense of, hey, this guy's got my back no matter what. And I'm going to have his back no matter what. And as long as people see that in each other, I think that they're really willing to work well above and beyond any normal measure of teamwork or any sense of business responsibility. It's where the real magic happens.
What made you become a Vistage chair? You exited your business 2023. You were, shall we say, flushed from the plumbing industry, and I guess you needed something else to do.
Yeah.
What led you to this?
I had been a member for 8 years. So before I bought the business, I had visited a gentleman in St. Paul who at the time had what I think was a $30 million business, which is a huge business in 2016 or 2015, whatever it was. And he told me, he sat in the office. I remember it was snowing and we were supposed to go back to the airport. We sat in his office and he spent all his time with us. And he said, I do two things for myself every month. And I can't remember for the life of me what the first thing he said was, but the second thing he said was, I go to my Vistage meeting. And I'm like, Vistage, what's that? And he's like, oh, it's this like CEO group. And I'm like, if it's good enough for you, it's good enough for me. And I came back and I bought the business. And then the very first thing I spent money on was my Vistage membership. And to make it even more coincidental, I called the Vistage hotline or whatever. I submitted a form. I spoke to what I guess was a business development rep. She connected me with a chair named Ed Curry, and Ed Curry his wife, Madeline, was my fourth grade school teacher. And I grew up with their middle son. And it was like this really weird coincidence. And so I was in Ed Curry's CE group for 8 years.
That is a wild coincidence.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. And how I got here then is when I was exiting the business, we had a number of people exit from our group. And, Ed said to me, you might take a crack at having your own group. It seems like you're good at asking questions and facilitating meetings and doing these things. And, if for no other reason other than to stay in the circulation with business people. And I got 7 months. I said I was going to take 2 years off, and I got 7 months in, and my wife was like, "You got to do something." and so I called the Vistage recruiter and
back on the Vistage hotline.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Before we did this, we asked you what's special about your group, and what do you what do you feel like is special, and what you said was that you every month you try to make it the best Vistage day, the best day of the month.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How do you do that, and what does that mean to you?
It's going to sound really cheesy, but I'm really hard on them. I don't let anyone off the hook when it comes to excuses or, a lot of people like, and you know how it is in groups, people like to give the veiled suggestions during clarifying questions.
Yeah.
And I don't let anybody get away with anything, and I make them go deep on issues. And it's, I'm sure this isn't unique to me, but I really push hard on these things. And we're very clear on time. We stick to the schedule. Again, I push them. I will tell every single one of those people in the room when they're not acting to the operating principles or the values of the group. And they repeat back to me the language that I use, and they routinely say at the end of it, "Hey, best meeting of the month." And so we get that feedback from them almost instantaneously, and people are like, "Hey, thank you so much for pushing us and being hard on us." And I think really where it comes from is just that's what I wanted when I was a CEO. I think that there's a lot of people, coaches that let people off the hook or aren't as accountability driven as they could be for whatever reason. And so I really wanted that when I was, and not that Ed wasn't, but I really wanted it. Like, I like the analogy of Nick Saban. Nick Saban said there's three kinds of players. There's like the average players, they don't want to be coached. The good players want to be coached when they do something well. But like the great players, they want to be coached all the time. And I take that view with people is that, I'm constantly coaching them. And it's like, you have to want that level of accountability and that level of push to be better in your business, to make better decisions, to live your values better, to be more consistent with the values and your delivery of them, to have a clearer vision, to speak it more often, to get the right people. I think that I wanted somebody to do that for me. And so I guess I'm living that out now.
Well, it's been terrific talking with you, Chris. If folks want information about your group, if they have questions about succeeding in a family business, if they want to know if investment banking and plumbing have anything in common, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Good old LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, Chris Donnelly. Everything is there. My phone number is there. I have a calendar there. My email is there. I probably take text better than I do anything else. So if you want to talk to me, you can text me, and I will likely get back to you very quickly.
Awesome. Chris Donnelly from Philadelphia, thank you so much for being a great guest.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Chairwaves. You can subscribe to our feed using Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your platform of choice. You can also visit chairwaves.com for more information. Chairwaves is hosted and produced by me, Eric Wolf, and to connect with me, you can visit my website at ewolf.live. That's EWOLF.live. And a disclaimer, while I love Vistage and CEO peer groups, this podcast is not owned by or affiliated with Vistage or any other peer organization. Thanks for listening.